Hello and welcome everyone to this webinar about purpose-driven companies and the regulation of the fourth sector. My name is Lilia Rizq and I'm the manager of the Emerging Leaders Unit here at the Policy Center for the New South. And it is my absolute pleasure to moderate the session today. We are very pleased to welcome around the virtual table or across the virtual panel a group of experts who will help us better understand the concept and purpose of purpose-driven companies and their link to the fourth sector and its development, which we will get into very shortly. For this conversation, we have Juan Diego Mujica, Peruvian legal scholar and corporate responsibility manager at the Sustainability Center of the University of Lima, who will delve into the necessary definitions and lay out the conceptual ground for the greater conversation. Juan Diego will also discuss the background and context for the collaboration between the United Nations Development Program, the International Development Research Center, and the Ibero-American General Secretariat that provided the backdrop for the project about purpose-driven companies, for which he was the academic coordinator and to which he kindly invited the Policy Center for the New South to contribute. We also have Abdelaziz Eitali, head of the Research and Economics Department at the Policy Center for the New South, and Ahmed Ouhnini, economist, also at the Policy Center for the New South, who will be presenting and sharing the main conclusions of a recently published paper about purpose-driven companies and the regulation of the fourth sector here in Morocco, which is available on the Policy Center's website, both in English and in French. Abdelaziz will provide the economic reasoning and backing, while Ahmed will look into the social and legal dimensions of purpose-driven companies in Morocco. We also welcome Ayoub Mamdouh, CEO and General Manager at OCP Solutions, who will be adding on to the conversation by bringing in a business model innovation perspective and narrowing in on the concept of purpose-driven companies and linking it to the 3 Ps, people, planet, and profit. Last but not least, we will be hearing from Leila Slassi, founding partner at Afrique Advisors, who was well accustomed to both the for-profit and non-profit worlds. Leila will comment on the paper, but also expand the conversation by sharing her extensive experience in civil society initiatives focused on youth and entrepreneurship, as well as her advisory role in corporate social responsibility labeling, all while providing a legal approach as well. We have a very interesting and important conversation ahead of us on purpose-driven companies and the fourth sector in Morocco. For people viewing this live, please write down your questions in the comment section of the YouTube channel or on the live broadcast on Facebook. And we will make sure to ask your questions during the question and answer portion at the end of the conference. And without any further ado, I now give the floor to Juan Diego, who will get us started.
Thank you, Lilia, and thanks to the Policy Center for its amazing collaboration to develop a Moroccan case study for the international research project that I coordinate. My name is Juan Diego Mujica, and I'm a legal scholar serving as academic coordinator of the project Purpose-Driven Companies and the Regulation of the Fourth Sector in Ibero-America. Since 2019, I've been working with the sponsoring organizations, SEGIB, UNDP, and IDRC to generate and share knowledge on the importance of an adequate regulation for the fourth sector and the concept of purpose-driven companies. I'm an alumni of the Adele Leaders Program, and through meeting Lilia and amazing colleagues in Morocco a couple years ago, I thought about the importance of collaborating on a report for Morocco since I learned about the special ecosystem and the thriving entrepreneurial ecosystem that is happening in the country. So we, through 2 years of hard work and very interesting conversations and discussions, have arrived to this report that we have worked with a lot of excitement with, of course, the help and leadership of Lilia and the authorship of Abdelaziz and Ahmed. So thank you very much to the authors for this amazing report and the time that we have talked and that we have dedicated to achieve this. So overall, this international research project comprises 22 Ibero-American countries and different international jurisdictions, both in different parts of the world. We seek to promote a policy roadmap and a redesign of legal frameworks for purpose-driven companies that contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. To explore such redesign, the project covers the state of legal models of purpose-driven companies and its regulatory frameworks with 3 main goals that are also present in the Moroccan case study that we hope can be a reference both for the country and for neighboring countries with similar legislations. First, it compares the legal models of purpose-driven companies in more than 15 countries within Ibero-America and abroad, which is so important for us to have a glimpse into the Moroccan way of doing corporate business and also working in sustainability issues in the private sector. Second, it sets out the main legislative and regulatory best practices, as well as looking at legal, financial, and technical obstacles. We have identified in the Moroccan case different good practices that can be, exported or talked about in different other countries, and also good practices from other countries that can be very helpful for the Moroccan case. And the authors will present in a few minutes. And finally, it presents a public policy proposal that includes an analysis on impact measurement as an important way to access both tax incentives and public procurement, which is one of the most interesting and innovative tools that purpose-driven companies in the context of the fourth sector can do to help businesses to thrive. The project was initially launched on the first Ibero-American phase in July 2021, and now we are moving along to present and publish our international collaborations and our international reports, such as the one that we're reporting today. So before giving the floor to both Ahmed and Abdelaziz, I just want to give you a little glimpse on what a purpose-driven company is in the context of the fourth sector. So what we are talking about now in legal academia worldwide is about a concept of a company that does not only look for profit, but it also looks to deliver on a social and environmental purpose or impact chosen by its shareholders. That usually implies 3 specific legal modifications. The first one to include in its bylaws the social environmental impact that is very specific and it can be measured. The second, it changes the different responsibilities and protections of directors and managers of a corporation or a business. So these directors or managers can act and not only look for profit, but also try to deliver on the social environmental impact. And the third element is usually the element of transparency, which is the adequate reporting on what's going on regarding this impact. This is a legal model that it's been discussed in legal academia worldwide. It's usually known in English as the benefit corporation, but it has been adopted in different legislations all across the world, also in Europe, in Canada, in Latin America, and it's being discussed in different countries of Africa as well. These 3 main elements are sometimes the common elements of what we will think about the legal definition of a purpose-driven company. So this is a company that has this very strong compromise, not only of the leadership, but of everyone involved to achieve these important objectives regarding their impact. These companies are proven to deliver special and important goals regarding the SDGs, and they can be a very good tool to help and aid the public sector and the third sector in delivering special goals. We are seeing these companies thrive, but we also see these companies struggle because our current legal ecosystem worldwide is not prepared for this hybrid regime. So that's a part of this definition that this report talks in depth and also goes into details regarding the Moroccan legal ecosystem and also the Moroccan commercial practice, which is one of the reasons why this is a must-read report in both the sustainability and corporate responsibility area in Morocco nowadays. The purpose-driven companies definition is also linked to the concept of the fourth sector, given that this emerging fourth sector is a sector where companies are not only looking for profit, but also looking for impact. So the shareholders of these companies will, of course, get their investment utilities or dividends, but they will actively support the impact they have chosen and they have put in their bylaws. So without further ado, I would like to give you back the floor, Lilia, and reiterate my gratitude and excitement of this amazing collaboration between these organizations and how great it was work with the Policy Center, and looking forward to starting with this report, do some follow-up work to understand this concept in the Moroccan context with the amazing entrepreneurs I met during my time in Marrakesh with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juan Diego. We were also very pleased by this collaboration and delving into the waters of purpose-driven companies in the fourth sector, and we look forward to continuing this conversation as well. And thank you as well for providing us with the conceptual background and the context needed to start this conversation. I now give the floor to my colleague Ahmed Ohnini, who will start us off on the Moroccan case study.
Thank you, Lilia. Thank you, dear Juan Diego. I appreciate the introduction. Dear speakers, it's great to be speaking with you in this event. And before going further in the discussion about the paper we will be presenting today, I have to say that I was very thrilled to take part in this international research project, which represents a great opportunity to open a debate about the role of companies, purpose, and corporate governance in general. As you know, most economies all over the world evolve in three different sectors: the government, the private sector, and the civil society. And the boundaries between these three sectors are already fading away. So more and more for-profit businesses has been taken on purpose and social and environmental value creation. And at the same time, nonprofits and governmental organizations are leaning toward market-based approaches to scale up their activities and increase their performances. So more and more organizations are combining the two logics of being commercially, socially, and environmentally engaged. And as Sir Juan Diego already said, this hybridization of the two logics is creating a sort of a new space at the intersection of the three sectors of the economy that we namely call the fourth sector. With that being said, fourth sector organizations or for-benefit organizations are still lacking supportive legal framework and face weak policies and regulations in most countries. And in fact, their recognition in law is more than essential, as their ability to enable economic value, social benefits, and positive impacts is no longer to be proven. Of course, legislatures play a significant role in creating suitable frameworks for companies likely to take on purpose by creating specific legal mechanisms regulating commercial activities that can enable pre-existing for-profit companies to pursue a social or environmental purpose, but also to foster a new responsible entrepreneurship ecosystem. In this research paper, we try to enlighten how Moroccan fourth sectors organizations are combining market-based approaches with social and environmental goals, with a focus on the existing legal mechanisms that allow different models of benefit organizations to make profit and lead purpose-driven practices as well. So what kind of companies we can find in Morocco are actually purpose-driven? The main finding, or the first one, is that we can say that social enterprises are the first newly created companies to expressly and voluntarily choose to respond to a specific issue or a major societal challenge and make it a source of its own profit. But even if social entrepreneurs in Morocco are growing in number, governments still cannot conceive their existence of these profiles combining the two roles, being at the same time entrepreneurs with a for-profit orientation or intent, and at the same time social change makers. So in the eyes of the public authorities, they are either businesses or NGO. And as a result, there is no preferential treatment for or incentives for this category of entrepreneurs holding those kind of companies that we can also consider as purpose-driven companies in the Moroccan case. When they are created, social enterprises are registered under a legal status of classic enterprise, which means a for-profit company, as long as the Moroccan legislature clearly separates of the status of enterprises between the commercial sector and the social and solidarity economy sector. So yet, social enterprises does not benefit yet from any tax cuts or treatments and are treated actually in the same way, legally speaking, as all other for-profit companies. It is also important to emphasize that social enterprises are not taken very seriously by decision makers in Morocco, as long as it is often assimilated to charity and remains dependent on the support, financially speaking, of large social entrepreneurship networks abroad. Now, what about corporate companies in Morocco? In Morocco, corporate companies tend to create a sort of non-profit association likely to be recognized as being of public utility, which means that is driven mainly by a general interest to which they contribute to a social or environmental purpose. In most cases, this extra financial purpose does not represent a response to a specific or social or environmental emergency or issue, but rather a pact to contribute to the social or economic development of the country through implementation of collective actions, development programs, and community development projects on different magnitudes and different fields of intervention that are not necessarily related to the core profit business. So the pursuit of a purpose for corporate companies in Morocco mainly falls outside the company sectors of activity and does not constitute the core of its profit business model. With that being said, corporate companies in Morocco put some large financial resources for their own non-profit association, as it allows them to access easily to the status of public utility from the authorities. They are often registered in the form of an association or a foundation, which usually bears the same name of the parent company, and in which is maintained organic relations. For example, OCP Group in Morocco and OCP Foundation. So these non-profit associations are governed by the law of public liberties and are integral parts of the ecosystem of civil society organizations. And they operate like private companies with a well-defined governance policy, strategy and mission, and well-structured organization chart, and employ qualified human resources. However, these associations are currently contested for the tax advantages that the legislature has conferred on them, yet their contribution to their economic and social development of the kingdom is not negligible. For the time being, they have not been subject to rigorous research study, and it's difficult today to give an accurate opinion on the analysis on the links they maintain with the founding entities, as well as the deployment of their resources in their field of intervention, which in the majority of the cases remains separate or not necessarily related to its profit-making core businesses. Indeed, the granted tax advantages allow them to raise considerable and unlimited funds from several national and international partners, from the corporate business environment, as well as from international development cooperation players. I would add that as the regulation of the fourth sector in Morocco is still lagging behind, we tried to go over some legislations abroad to see what kind of foreign experiences could inspire the Moroccan design of a legal framework for purpose-driven companies. The most significant and recent regulation actually for the fourth sector we have presented in this paper is the French case, which is the Société à Mission. The French legislature actually did not create a new commercial legal status for purpose-driven companies, but a new legal form of quality, or we can also call a label, that all corporate companies with diverse commercial status are likely to be granted if some conditions are gathered. And this notion was introduced in 2019 in order to foster French corporate competitiveness by reconsidering their role in the society to create pathways between for-profit organizations and sustainable development issues. In the first case, corporations are invited to choose and deliberately declare a purpose that defines what social or environmental issues are to be solved through their commercial activities. It is to be registered in their own commercial legal status as defined as the civil code, which is to be mentioned as the raison d'être, or stands for a simple question, why do I exist? And it can also be assimilated to the company's mission or simply represents what their activities are standing for. Just to give you some insights about this concept of société à mission, it was introduced to establish a framework for shareholders to have social and environmental considerations and their ability of making extra financial benefits. And it's also a public reflection of their major commitments toward the society that they are likely to have driving profits. To conclude, why we should choose purpose. Connecting purpose with the heart of the company means reappraising your core, the strategy you pursue, the operations driving you forward, and the organization itself. It's hard work, and we can do it with deep engagement with employees and broader stakeholders. Purpose also generates top-line growth by creating more loyal customers, fostering trust, and preserving the customer's base. Purpose can unleash employees' potential by helping businesses to win the war of talent and help businesses retain their best people and best employees' motivation. Purpose-driven companies Purpose can also make you aware of shifting external expectations, policy directions, and industry standards, thereby helping businesses identify risks they might otherwise miss. So I might give now the floor to Sir Abdelaziz Aitali to present the second part of the paper, and thank you so much.
Thanks, Ahmed. Thanks to our colleague Juan, for our partner in this project, and thanks to Lilia for giving us the floor to share with our audience our thoughts and our main takeaways of our research. So we were working on the idea of delivering a paper, I think 2 years ago, on the fourth sector, especially the purpose-driven companies, and then the pandemic struck the planet and brought the world to its knees. And in the course of the 2020, we realized how much disruption our life system will endure, and to what extent the pandemic is representing actually a critical juncture affecting the course of history. And one of the main expression of this new paradigm, I believe, is the reshuffling of the multilateral relation between the citizen, the state, and the company. And my presentation will be articulated around this complex relation, this triangle, to what extent the fourth sector and the purpose-driven company might bring in some added value in regulating better this type of relation. So every citizen on the planet was actually expecting more from the government and the state in general in terms of the social protection and the setting of at least some temporary social safety nets during the COVID crisis and during specifically the confinement. This is what actually happened all over the world. So developed and developing countries managed no efforts to support household and company. And since then, we have witnessed the strong comeback of the welfare state, in which the state actually plays the well-being as one of the top priorities of their objective, and the social and the environmental aspects are the key dimensions of the welfare at this stage. On one side, we are quite confident that this is bound to stay with us once for all, and that the state has to consider seriously to rethink its set of objectives and to come across a fully fledged approach to handle this new rising demand by the citizens for those public services in the form of an adapted health service, a highly quality education system, and a more environmentally friendly public policy. So even the Bretton Woods institutions, which are the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, have set up a new narrative, and now they are urging actually countries to prioritize social spending, namely in the health sector and the educational sector. And even the World Bank is qualifying the fiscal behavior of the governments in the last 2 to 3 decades here in the MENA region specifically as myopic, by disregarding the investment in the human capital. So the shift in the narrative of those icons of the liberalism and the capitalism really means something. But on the other side, it's not only about do we have really the means to make these ambitions come true? And I think setting the example of comprehensive social protection system like the one being implemented here in Morocco, it will cost around $6 billion a year, equivalent to something close to 5% of GDP. And what makes it even tougher, I think, is that this same COVID that have brought a new perspective in the relation between the citizen and the state has also put tremendous pressure on the public finances and the ability to fulfill all the citizens' expectation. For example, if we take the example of OECD countries, public debt have skyrocketed, reaching one of the highest level in history since the World War II, and the sustainability of the current financial model is under threat, especially for developing countries encountering problems in balancing their financial situation. And here in Morocco, the public debt in general, including the implicit one, are reaching 100%. What I want to say is that the state is caught between the growing demands amplified by the COVID and the constraints imposed by the crisis on the budget and the ability to fund the system. And meanwhile, there is a mounting mainstream pushing to reconsider deeply the fiscal management to break free from the orthodox guidelines in financial management. They overall say that the debt is not an issue. It's just a mean, and developing countries should deploy it to aim for their objective. I'm not one of those, for a simple reason that history is full of economic and social distress brought by an accumulation of debt that does not necessarily enable the nation to move forward. So I think it's a bet that we should not make automatically. So, and the answer, or at least a part of it, is in the objective of our papers, lies in fact in setting a new framework, an innovative one, to invite the private sector to take up the well-being as an intermediary goal. And this where I see that the fourth sector and the purpose-driven companies are quite suitable in this context, as they enable to address public, social, and societal issue, leveraging on the efficiency of the private sector. Indeed, in the last 3 decades, we have witnessed new forms of collaboration between the private and the public sector. And the most famous one is actually the PPPs framework that has emerged as an innovative one, and arrangements that enable greater involvement of the private sector in the public administration. For the case of Morocco, this model has shown success, especially in the infrastructure projects. So I tend to locate and position this purpose-driven companies as a natural evolution in the forms of public-private partnerships, which this time empowers the private sector with more room of maneuver and a particular conducive framework to its strong, sustainable, and effective commitment in getting involved and promoting in preserving public goods. So if some companies might align to these principles without formally operating within a specific regulatory box, and my colleague Ahmed have raised and mentioned some of them, the majority of our productive fabric need a clear and transparent and mainly conducive legislation to get everyone on board. What I mean by conducive is the incentive signal that makes sure everyone is committed to serve the same objective. So beside the pressure coming from consumers, nowadays more sensitive to social responsibility, I do believe that the tax policy in here could play a key role in fostering the spread of the purpose-driven companies framework, or at least make sure companies consider seriously social responsibility when framing their business model. And during the COVID crisis, specifically the confinement period, we have witnessed a wave of solidarity crossing the Moroccan civil society, in which many companies have shown their commitments in supporting distressed family and households, either by supporting them by financial or in-kind assistance. But unfortunately, there were no incentive for this company, at least some tax cuts that considers their contribution in fighting the dire consequences of the crisis. The only measure that goes in this vein is actually the tax exemptions instituted on contribution to this famous solidarity fund created by the Moroccan government to cope with the effects, and even these decisions came afterwards as a kind of reward to these companies that have actually contributed. So Lilia, just one sentence and I will conclude. So the demand for social services here to stay, and the resources are not, unfortunately, so abundant. So the need to reinvigorate the level of application of the private sector in serving public goods worth rethinking, and the purpose-driven companies framework is one of the solution. Not for sure a miracle one, but I think it's a concrete step forward. So I'll stop here.
Thank you, Abdelaziz. The point that you mentioned about the impact that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on the ways citizens and consumers view conventional businesses and the potential shift of state priorities is definitely noteworthy. It seems as though this may be an opportunity to push for greater alignment and balance between purpose and profit, and perhaps keeping people and the planet at the center of the conversation and of businesses and business models. And that provides us with a great segue to Ayoub's presentation, to whom I now give the floor.
Thank you, Lilia. Thank you indeed. It's a great segue. But first of all, let me really thank the policies, the authors for their real contribution, because I can't stress enough how this subject is very important for us as Moroccans, but also in the world, and probably in the next 10, 20 years will be much more than a discussion, but really something that will change our life. So. Let me start with some elements. The first one, I think that the authors highlighted a lot the lack of legal framework for the société à mission or social entrepreneurship, etc., etc. That's true because for the last 10, 12 years, we had a boom of social entrepreneurs, because in Morocco we had a youth that's like changing their ways of just having a diploma and getting in big corporations. They were pushing for a new paradigm of entrepreneurship, and then a lot of incubators or Kickstarters and a lot of civil society initiatives were pushing a lot of social entrepreneurship. I remember that in like 10 years or 12 years ago, there was a launch of the Moroccan Center of Innovation for Social Entrepreneurship, which is like, was 10 years ago, 12 years ago. So it was something new, but from that point, we had a lot of initiatives like that. And this is makes clear that of course, there was incentives from the civil society, from a lot of foundations, especially European, in particular German foundation, to push this this kind of new, let's say, entities. But clearly, there was a lack from legal, or at least, as you said, Abdelaziz, from a fiscal standpoint. So about your the publication, what I loved a lot is this definition of the fourth state, you know, and I try to find a metaphor like for the state of water, you know, between we have the solid, the liquid, and the gas. So the fourth state will be like plasma, or a kind of amalgam, you know, it's an amalgamatic state where you have the best of the three worlds. We can say that, so it's one way of saying it's really the meeting of this kind of in the middle state. What I think, this is like a counter hypothesis, if I may, or antithesis, if I may, is that, and you say that, Abdelaziz, is that there will be probably a natural switch for this new fourth state, and in which case I don't think personally it will be a fourth state, but just the third state of private sector. Is that you talked about the pandemic, I don't know if you know that, but even before the pandemic, like in 2019, the CEOs of the FT 500 like met, and of course they were like challenging their paradigms, and the conclusion was that if they, which is paradoxal by the way, but they said that if they focus only on profits, they will be not financially viable or sustainable, which is kind of paradoxal, because of course financially viable or financially sustainable, it will be about profit. But they said no, because today in the business model we have. The business model is what? Is a value proposition, a value chain, and an economic equation. So on the value proposition, we can't have only financial lens. Okay, so we need to have these three lenses: the profits, of course, because we are in capitalism, but also about the people, which is the social inclusion and the ecosystem, etc., etc., and of course the planet, because the planets have limited resources, and of course there is the climate change, the challenge, etc., etc. So clearly today there is this conscience about having these 3P lenses in consideration, not only money. And today it's pushed, and Ahmed mentioned earlier, is that there is the customer trends. Of course, there is a lot of push from legal, from the public sector, etc., depending on the countries. But also there is one big trend, especially post-pandemic, but it was already the case before the pandemic, is the employees. Like recently in the US, we had what we now call the big quits. A lot of people like quit their jobs because there was this shock, economic shock, because a lot of businesses went out of business. But then when the economy starts back on, people will say, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, not for the money, because I need to realize myself, etc., etc. So I need to find something that really speaks to me. And like in our company, OCP Solutions, we do a lot of work with companies about the business model and their mission statement, etc. And one thing that really we found out is that a lot of employees today, and not only the young ones, because a lot of people say, okay, this is the new generation, the Generation Z or Y, or I don't know, millennials, but even I'd say the older generations, they were like, really, we need to work on something that makes sense. Donc, in French, faire sens, that speaks to them, that at the end of the day, when they are back to their home, to their families, they say, I contributed to the society, not to the company, but not only to the company. So of course, the profit part, it will still always be there, because this is the capitalism we live in. But clearly, this is the question of saying, why should I work for this company rather than the other? And of course, there is today a shortage of talent, especially in some segments. And people today say, okay, I need to work to something that I think that I'm contributing to the planet, to the people around me, to the ecosystem, to the country. Also, there is a nationalist point of view, especially in Morocco, to say, I want to be patriotic and so to contribute to my country and my countrymen well-being. So this is why I think personally that your work can be a great contribution, maybe, and that this is the question or the challenge I'm putting out there, is to say, is there a new paradigm for capitalism? Okay, so because today we had the capitalism for like at least for the 150 years since the Industrial Revolution in England. So probably should we, or will the humanity naturally evolve towards a new capitalism that will define the paradigm of what a company means, etc., etc. Of course, as you say, there will be a need of legal framework, but not only, because there is also the participation of civil society, but also the, as I said, the employees and the talent out there that probably will migrate even without an incentive, but clearly the incentives, especially the fiscal ones, can be very, very important. And the second one, you talked about it, Abdelaziz, is maybe also, is it also a point in history when we will consider as well a new paradigm of public service? You mentioned the PPPs, or the partnership between public and private. So maybe with this kind of société à mission, and I like the French framework, not only because the legal French framework is close to the Moroccan one, but also because I think personally that it's something that the companies will migrate towards this société à mission rather to create a parallel sector. But in this case, this société à mission, maybe because they will be incentivized by profits, of course, but also with this public value proposal or added value for the public, for the government and for the citizen and for the civil society, that maybe these companies will be, I want to say, the best of two worlds or even three worlds. So having the public interest or the public added value in as a mission, and the means and the resources of the government, because of course governments and states have a lot of resources, but also what we lack in general in the public sector, this private sector efficiency. So having clear KPIs, having clear objective, financial objective, and other quantitative and qualitative objective. So this is the thing I'm saying here, is to say really, is this natural evolution, will it create a new paradigm for capitalism or a new paradigm for private, for public service, or both? I don't know. This is, I would say, my conclusion on this matter.
Thank you very much, Ayoub, for broadening the conversation and bringing in perspectives about entrepreneurship, about social enterprises and business models. The question you posed about a new capitalism and the point you mentioned about employees needing to align with the company's purpose and needing to have an impact is extremely interesting and important. And this may serve as pressure to change paradigms in terms of business models and public services, as you were mentioning. So Ayoub, you brought in your practical and on-the-ground experience, and I now give the floor to Leila, who will further expand on purpose-driven companies by sharing her experience on the ground as well. So Leila, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lilia. Hello, everyone. It was really interesting, actually, to go through this study because you, the authors, put some very interesting words on something we've been all noticing all across our daily interaction, either into the corporate world, but also the civil society. Actually, it's true. In Morocco and in many countries around the world, we have these two spaces that seems to be completely far one from the other, at least from a legal perspective. You have on the one hand these traditional commercial companies with specific rules when it comes to corporate law, but also to tax law. And in the other hand, the non-profit organizations. In Morocco, and in many other countries, but I will talk about the Moroccan legal framework. So in Morocco, you have these traditional commercial companies, and their purpose is to make profit. And this is something clear in our commercial code, but also in our tax code. So this profit is to be distributed to the shareholders, but also, and I think that's something key, and Abdelaziz, you mentioned it earlier, to the tax authorities. Actually, the tax administration is can be seen as a shareholder in all the countries in Morocco. They have to get a portion of your revenues, of the revenues of all the companies, actually to finance some public goals. So what they do is, by acting as a shareholder and actually controlling the company and the way the company complies with their tax obligation, they can challenge the way company deduct some expenses from their revenue, and which make it very complicated for companies actually to invest or spend money in non-for-profit organization, or if they want to introduce themselves some initiatives in order to contribute to their environment into social initiatives, for example. So today, according to our current legal system in Morocco and current tax system in Morocco, if you spend money, and if you spend money, if you finance as a company an NGO, the tax authorities don't help you at all. They consider this investment and this expense as something that do not fit your purpose, because according to this mindset, purpose is only to make profit, and that's it. So we see here that there's a real challenge in this way of looking at things, and we can get inspired by other countries where they fixed, or actually they put in place some initiatives to make it more easy. So, and you mentioned in your paper the recognition of public utility. I will talk about that a little bit later. But you also identified in this paper how complicated it is to get this status, how opaque the procedure is. So the commercial companies also identify, and this is something we've been noticing more and more, because they are now encouraged to be active in their communities by some financing institution. They more and more try to put in place these actions, even if these actions are not tax deductible. But they will try to get some labels, they will try to show to investors or to financing institutions that they comply with some sustainable goals in order to get access to a financing. So that helped a lot the financial sector. When the financial sector decided, and actually some of the financing institutions decided to promote sustainable goals through by making it as a criteria for granting a financing. It's actually inspired a lot of companies to suddenly identify a purpose and a goal, and to get engaged and have its employees engage into this goal. The problem also we're facing today in the current state of our legal system is the fact that the shareholders can also challenge the way a management team will allocate the revenues of a company. So today, because the management team is subject to a fiduciary duty, this management team cannot decide, can be challenged by its shareholders when they decide, for example, to make donations to an NGO or to invest in an initiative serving the public. So we see these are clear limits that are in our current legal system that can be corrected very easily. And I also really like the French way of doing it. It's a first step. I think we have to see it as a first step, but it has the very advantage of making it super easy. It's not a new form of company as we can see in the US, but it's the current companies that can decide just to write in their bylaws and to commit to a special purpose by stating that they have a mission. And some very famous companies did it, and it can. I'm sure it will actually expand. I think we can say here our dream can be that in Morocco and everywhere, that all the companies, every single company decide to choose a purpose. And I'm sure it's very easy to find, even for companies that are purely for profit. They always have a community in which they are active and can very easily identify a purpose within this community. What I want to share with you here is also something that was not precisely described in your paper, but I think it's worth sharing. It's also so because you mentioned the companies that wants to serve a purpose and find some difficulties in trying to do so, and the need for us to push for a better legal framework. But at the same time, we have NGOs, and we have a lot of NGOs in Morocco. Actually, only 200 and so have the status of legal recognition for utilité publique, but we have more than 220,000 NGOs in Morocco, very active in all the areas of we can imagine: health, education, employment, women's empowerment, etc. These NGOs, these 220,000 NGOs, are doing an extraordinary work on the ground. They know the community very well. Very few of them are lucky enough to get this recognition of public utility, and then to have access to this tax incentive attached to it, allowing companies making donations to these companies to deduct this donation from their taxes. These entities actually, they contribute to what I think it was Ahmed mentioned earlier, this actually role that is allocated to traditionally to the state or to the government, but they do it at their level. So we can put in place some very simple way to help them get a better financing by removing, and that's the way it was done in France. That's actually the way it is done in France. If we want to get inspired also by this system, in France, for example, the deductibility of donation is not limited to the NGOs that have this recognition of public utility, but to all NGOs that serve a public interest. The control of the definition of public interest is not done a priori with a label that allows you to go and get funding, but the control is done a posteriori. So if you are a company, you can donate to any NGO that appears to you as having a public interest, and then it's a posteriori. The tax administration can challenge this deduction because they consider that it do not serve a public interest. So they just reverse the paradigm, and I think that helped a lot the French NGOs succeed in getting a financing. But I was mentioning earlier that you mentioned the companies leading to the non-for-profit sector, but we also see the opposite, the movement, NGOs trying to act as companies in order to get a sustainable source of financing. And I think that's a very interesting trend. We see it in a lot of NGOs. Actually, I serve in board of some NGOs that decided to implement also this, some companies, some commercial companies, their unique shareholder is a foundation or the NGO. And actually, because they have an expertise, they have some knowledge they can sell, they sell this expertise to clients. Actually, our clients know that by buying this service to this company being owned by the NGO, it will serve definitely a public, the public interest. And here we have, as NGOs, to actually, the challenge is perception, because we receive donations because we are NGOs, so very easy to get access to financing actually from donors when you're an NGO, but the problem is sustainability. But when you decide to sell also to certain clients that are willing to buy from an NGO a service, then it allows you to fix the sustainability of your financing issue. But we have to fight for the perception. NGO don't want to look like corporate companies because per definition, they need to be seen as NGOs. But we see also this movement from NGOs to the corporate work for this sustainability of their source of financing reason. But today, we see in most of the, big funders, initially the criteria to get access to a donation or to a funding was to be legally an NGO, but now more and more, they also provide fundings to companies that serve a public interest mission. So we see this movement going from corporate work to NGOs, from NGOs to corporate work. But what it says actually is that, and that's Mamdouh, you explained it very well. What it says that we are in a need of impact. We are in a need of purpose and of a mission. We choose our employers because of what they do, how they inspire our communities, how they are engaged in our communities. We choose our products this way, and more we will be acting this way because it's actually it's actually the way it should be, because it makes sense, because it just makes sense, and we are all more and more looking for sense in everything we do. So few tips to maybe get some ideas if we want to change our legal and tax framework in order to make the fourth sector companies more attractive and encourage companies to get involved in their communities could be through the tax system. So not for the tax authorities to accept the deductibility of donations to any NGO. No need for this NGO to have this recognition of public interest. It's a very long process. We've been doing it in one of the NGOs I'm active on. It's a very long process. It can be very opaque. You have it's a decision to be taken by the Prime Minister. So it tells you how strong this commitment is, and do we really need it? Can't we say that our NGOs, our 220,000 NGOs active in Morocco, we all know plenty of them, are not serving a public interest? Do we really need the state to give us a stamp on that and to say, okay, you are fitting a public interest and you are not? So I think we can guess that they're all serving this public interest, and maybe for some reason of control, we don't want this to be used as a way to escape from tax. But let's give them this let's control it, but at posteriori, not a priori, because today this constitutes a real challenge for the NGOs to get access to funding. And it's also, the French system put in place some thresholds. For example, you can't deduct more than 20% of your revenues. You can only deduct 66% of your donation. So we can limit this a little bit, but at least open it and not let it dedicated only to a very, very happy few NGOs that are strong enough and big enough to get this recognition statute. So this for the NGOs and for the companies, but also I think could be important in our commercial code to and in order to also encourage the management teams of companies to get involved in their communities and in social and environmental projects. To include that as also something that cannot be challenged by shareholders when it comes to control the fiduciary duty of their management team. We can find a way to exclude these actions and these projects from the notion of mismanagement, because today it's clearly the case. Because today, if a management team tries to get to invest this sphere, this can be something challenged by their shareholders. So, and of course, encourage the French system. I think our Moroccan system is very close. The commercial one is very close to the French one. So that could be, I think, the easiest way to do it. It's a very smart actually, but why not take it to the next level? That I think we should see it as a first step to just put this purpose in the mind of the core of our Moroccan capitalism. But let's see it. I hope we will see it as a first step and evolve there a particular and dedicated form of companies, as it's the case in the US with the B Corp. And that will be like a form of companies dedicated for the purpose that their raison d'être being their purpose. So these are a few ideas we can explore to promote more and more this legal framework, this legal and tax framework.
Thank you, Leila. You've given us more to think about, and you've expanded on the legal framework or lack thereof, supporting purpose-driven companies and social enterprises. You've also provided us with a comparison with commercial businesses and companies, and you've extended the conversation to NGOs as well. So thank you for doing that. We can now open the floor for questions from our viewers and audience and from other panelists. But before we do that, I was wondering if Juan Diego, you would like to jump in and comment on what Leila was saying and the rapprochement that she made between purpose-driven companies and NGOs and the legal support that NGOs should be getting in order to pursue their purpose and their positive effect in terms of the service that they're providing.
Thank you, Lilia, and thank you all for your very insightful both presentation and the report and discussion. It has been really fascinating and very interesting how these major topics are not only happening in Morocco, but happening in all of the countries that are covered in this international research project. I think that when we are discussing about this emerging fourth sector, one of the important things that we have to recognize as Leila was talking was that each of these different sectors serve a special objective and a special purpose, and that's different in each case. And there is no replacement that the fourth sector would do towards the third sector, which is a very, very important sector of the economy, and it needs their own regulation and their own ways to thrive because they serve specific objectives and specific purposes that will not be served by a private company. Having said that, I think that this opens, when we're talking about reviewing this legal ecosystem, this opens the discussion to also tweak in a better way the legal provisions towards third sector organizations, and how do we empower them in a better way for them to serve their own public purpose. I think that the learnings from the third sector are very, very important to creating adequate regulation for the fourth sector, and also that can show us a path towards new action points regarding a public policy agenda, a legal agenda, and a commercial practice agenda. I find fascinating the way that entrepreneurs and business people are using legal tools that the third sector provides to not only have a company, but also have a purpose and an impact-driven goal. And I think that has been a very important tool that has been used all over the world for the last 30, 40 years. And that now with the emergence of the fourth sector, it can be changed, it can be sort of rethinked, but definitely the importance of the third sector will stay there, having their own goals and their own way of creating this impact. And just to end, I think that the shared common important aspect towards rethinking the legal ecosystem, both regarding the fourth sector and creating a fourth sector legally, because now in most countries, we can talk about it in practice, but maybe legally it's not recognized. What we have are the tools, the very powerful tools of the third sector, and having an empowered third sector is crucial in its importance to then talk about an adequate regulation for the fourth sector. So what we have now are the tools of the third sector, and that's why we have to also include that in our conversation. So thank you, Leila, for your very important insight on that. And I just want to finish up this intervention with how incredible it is to know that entrepreneurs and purpose-driven people are sorting out so many legal obstacles using the existing tools to deliver impact. And that's something that is both, very honorful, but also we as lawyers, impact-driven people, public policy makers, researchers, and academia, we are doing the right thing in always proposing to rethink how the current legal environment and the current legal framework is, because legal frameworks can be changed and they don't have to stay the same forever, right? So I think that this report, again, is opening several doors of conversation for research people, for students doing their thesis in universities in Morocco and abroad, and also think tanks such as the Policy Center.
Recording in progress.
Thank you very much, Juan Diego, for those additional elements. I'd like to ask you a question, actually, to get us started on in the Q&A and conversation part of this webinar. It seems that here in Morocco, we're perhaps lagging behind in terms of providing the right incentives and legal framework for purpose-driven companies to first exist and then to thrive. How does our situation here in Morocco compare to the other jurisdictions that you've had the opportunity to work with and look into? And how far along are other jurisdictions, and what can we perhaps learn? You were mentioning earlier, sharing best practices. Is there something that we could look more into here in Morocco, and something that you can tell us more about, given the work that you've done with other jurisdictions in other countries?
Yes, Lilian, and happy to start this round of Q&A. So regarding the learnings that I could see during the process of coordinating this research project and the phase of talking and sharing with different legal scholars, and also different people in the public sector and in the private sector regarding purpose-driven companies, I would say that there are some countries that are having a very interesting different legal teams that are trying to to have a very strong leadership with the public sector and with legislators to promote purpose-driven companies and change the laws in different ways. And as we have talked, there is no one unique recipe. There are many ways in which inserting a purpose-driven company framework can be done in different countries. And even though they can be legal exports, these legal exports can be revisited, reworked, to work in a specific jurisdiction. So what I see in the different countries is that this has already started. And what I noticed regarding Morocco is that there are some enabling situations that may, in the future, lead legal teams to start their own journey regarding purpose-driven companies and other aspects. And I think that this is why this report that we have been working on for almost 2 years is so important, because this can be the first seed in that journey. I saw many interesting aspects of your third sector regulation that is either similar or very interesting in comparison towards this same type of regulation regarding other countries. And I think that there can be lessons both taught by the Moroccan legal framework and also learned by the Moroccan legal framework within different countries in these aspects. So I think that's definitely something that I really thought about. What do we want to make clear regarding the next steps of purpose-driven companies in general is that one of the best allies of this new legal framework is how we measure impact and how we actually know that impact can be measured. That cannot be an arbitrary decision, and that has to be really transparent, really clear, and very well thought and concluded, because we should not, in any country, let someone with no sort of like transparency requirement say what's good purpose-driven impact and what's not, or environmental impact and what's not. There has to be a level of transparency, a level of expertise that really shows that this is something that is actually creating positive impact. So I think that we can all start thinking about ways on how we can include that on legal frameworks. This is, I think, and just to conclude, the challenge of the fourth sector and of purpose-driven companies, because what we definitely want to avoid is this very corrosive concept of greenwashing, or now called impact washing, where companies do that they do impact, but they really don't. So I think that that's something that just to embed is a common challenge. It's a shared challenge for all of our countries, with no exception of the countries that have been visited in this research project, both in the US, Canada, continental Europe, the UK, Latin America, Spain, and Portugal, are sort of free from the risk of impact washing. I think that that's the most corrosive aspect, because that just undermines the trust needed for purpose-driven companies to thrive.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing, Juan Diego. I can see some of our other speakers nodding their heads. I was wondering if you'd like to jump in and comment on what Juan Diego was mentioning.
Yeah, the control is key. If you want this to be sustainable and to succeed, we need to put in place strong control tools. Maybe again, the French system is inspiring for us because it's very close to the Moroccan one. But what have been done in France is to control the mission of companies. They put together an independent body that is in charge of controlling actually the purpose companies decided to choose. And they also obliged company to have at least one of their employees that is dedicated to control and track the impact the company is making within this purpose they choose. In Morocco, and your paper, the paper actually identified the SEGIB as a potential partner to track this impact. I think it's very interesting, and SEGIB is actually, and I'm a member of this jury, have this label called Le Label pour la responsabilité sociale des entreprises. So we grant labels to companies that are engaged into this journey by challenging them on their mission, how they do it. And I've been sitting in this jury for the past 2 to 3 years, and it's very interesting to see how also the educational work SEGIB tries to do within this commission, because companies, actually the purpose-driven companies, we have some perception that needs to be changed. Doing good is not necessarily a synonym of being engaged into a sustainable journey. Doing good is something, being sustainable and acting for, having a social responsibility is something else. But at the SEGIB, what we try to do with companies that decide to engage into the process to get the label is to help them year after year and step by step put together a real and serious program in order to implement these goals into their communities. It's a long journey. We need to start somewhere, but it's a whole educational work these bodies have to take. But it was doing it because, of course, if we don't control this very well, the risk of abuse and the risk of the risk of abuse of customers, of tax administration is very, very high.
Thank you, Leila. You were mentioning CSR policy, and actually, I have a basic question that will go back to the conceptual aspect of it all, and to things that you were mentioning, even Juan Diego, at the beginning of this presentation. But what would be the difference between a purpose-driven company and a commercial company with a developed CSR policy? Are they the same? And what's the fundamental difference, and how can we differentiate them? Leila or Juan Diego or any of our other speakers?
If I may, Lilia, because it's something I just wanted to jump on, and this, thank again for the segue, always a good way of following things. So yes, this is a very good question, because people at the end of the day say, you know what, let's just have a CSR policy, and this is good, and this is very positive also for the social environment and then for the planet. But again, it's just one question about if we just want to have a nice to have, or something just have just some financial incentives, or we want to have it coded in the DNA of the companies. And this is what really changes from a company to another, because it's like for the financial of the digital, or even for the innovation. If you take a company like Apple, they don't say, you know what, we have iPhones and computers and so on and so on. And by the way, we have innovation that is a tool among others. No, they say that innovation is in their DNA. So this is something that really drives them and like put everyone in the employees, the community, the customers, and the shareholders and the stakeholders all around this vision and this mission statement that they want to innovate. And this is the case also for, again, the 3P, the planet, profit, and people framework, is to say, saying this is CSR, again, it's very helpful. Don't get me wrong, this is very helpful. And of course, it's one way of having this glide path. But again, the objective for me, at least, it's the end game. I don't know when, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, or even in 50 years, 50, is really to have this kind of 3P mentality really encoded in the DNA. It's something that's not only just something that we show to the auditors or the government just for the sake of having less taxes, to pay less taxes, etc. No, it should be a big like KPI or an objective like the profit is. There's no company in the world when you say, okay, it's nice to have profits. If you don't, it's not that big deal. No, it's something that is encoded in the capitalistic companies like for the last 150 years. It should be the same for the sake of sustainability, for the sake of ecosystem inclusion, to have also the other things encoded rather than just one incentive, tax incentive among others.
Thanks for jumping in, Ayoub.
I want to also add, I'm happy that you brought this on the table about CSR policy and what is the difference with purpose-driven companies. Actually, companies with CSR policies are trained to report on what in their operations, how they are doing well in the three elements of sustainability: environment, social, and economic aspects. Actually, but purpose-driven companies, it's all about transforming the whole core business about purpose. It's making purpose at the heart of the profit-making journey of a company. So what is that? That's the main difference actually between having a CSR policy and being a purpose-driven company. This is a very important aspect to share with all of you. And I think that also in Morocco, we have to, I think that this paper is a great paper to launch the discussion about the fourth sector and how we can organize it, and try to sort of invite many stakeholders to think about purpose, to to make corporate companies aware about the value of purpose and how they can make it a source of profit. Because actually it's not a matter of companies not interested in purpose. Sometimes they are not aware of it. That's only a question of awareness, actually. So this paper can create a sort of this of debate. And I think it's a very good idea to invite large stakeholders, including employees, companies, shareholders, and key players actually in the business sector to talk about the fourth sector and how they can actually use this hybridization of being of making a profit journey and at the same time respond to a purpose that represents social or environmental aspects. So thank you.
If I may jump back in and really build it up on what Ahmed says, and thank you, Ahmed, it's really, this is one very important point you mentioned, Ahmed, is that it changes the fact that is encoded in the DNA, it changes even the business model and the operating model. Meaning that even the way of doing the business, even the way of operating, even the machines that we are buying, etc., makes that people will say, okay, this is very important and this is one of our objectives. So we will change our way rather than say, okay, we will do the same things as before, but we will give some money, etc. And the second point Ahmed really mentioned very well is that the thing, and this is what I mentioned earlier, that again, doing the 3P is not about being nice or having nice PR or what's all. It's really something about being financially viable and financially sustainable. So this is something to say, we will do this because in this order we'll have more loyal customers, we'll have more loyal employees, we'll have probably the best talent that out there, and maybe again have help from the government or the civil society, but at the end of the day, it will go towards having more profit and more financial sustainability rather than again just put a CSR.
Lilia, if I may, just to thank Mahmoud and Leila for their insightful comments and bringing to our attention some points that were missed in our paper, and I'm really grateful to their comments. I think the points that Mahmoud just raised, he asked the question on the future of capitalism. I totally agree that there are so many questions right now on its future. I think there are signs that we are taking a kind of a turn, that we are moving out from a very liberal, very, I would say, cruel world economic system into a world where we consider much more purpose. Mahmoud said it, that there are companies right now, the biggest company, are right now saying that the profit, seeking profit is not sustainable itself. So in order to seek profit, there are some intermediate or targets. And in order to keep your employees right now, you don't just need the package, the retirement package or the wage signal to attract them. And I think there are also signs coming from the developed world. The liberal system is based over what we call the Washington Consensus. So right now, so many economists are questioning this Washington Consensus, in which we are saying that the public sector, its role, it's regulating the system. The public sector should retire from the private life and should let the private sector take the lead. And this is something that so many economists right now are questioning in the developed worlds, in these economies where they are pioneer in the capitalism system. So I think we are witnessing a shift to less material, to more purpose in our life. I also liked how Leila framed this a posteriori assessment of the public the public impact of companies. I think it makes sense. The tax system should consider it that way, because once you contribute into an NGO, once you give a kind of public service, I imagine that they should consider us being innocent in our act and not guilty from the first time. They have to do their assessment at the end of the system to see actually if we are aligning to the objective. Just want to add one thing on this shifts. I think it's not anymore a pressure coming from the consumer, coming from the employee, but coming also from abroad. Right now, the economic partners of Morocco, I'll take the example of Morocco, are pushing towards aligning to this objective. And I will take here the example of the climate change. Right now, you know that Europe right now have set its Green Deal, in which it will set a kind of a carbon border adjustment tax. So whenever you want to access to the European market, you have to reduce your carbon footprints. And this goes in the same vein in our discussion. So Morocco right now, it's not a luxury anymore to adopt this kind of objective. It's in order to have your profits, to accede to your profit, you have to adapt to this new regulatory framework. So the pressure is not anymore internal, it's coming from outside. Thank you.
Thank you, Abdelaziz, for those additional elements. We are getting close to the end of our webinar. Maybe we have time for one last question coming from our audience. Could the panel please speak to specific examples of how governments have supported or facilitated the development of these purpose-driven companies? We've touched upon this a little bit, but would one of you like to take on this question?
So to answer this question, I can just give a couple examples. So one of the things that it's most common in the world of purpose-driven companies in these countries that have a legal framework is through sustainable public procurement, where companies can go through a public procurement either contest or administrative process, and they will, because they have these special condition and this impact can be measured, they can gain a little more points on the public procurement scheme because they are a purpose-driven company. So that's one of the many tools. Then other tools involve, for example, access to funds regarding to innovation, regarding to or linked to the SDGs or to ESG measures, where companies that are purpose-driven companies, as defined by law, and getting all the checks in whatever the law requires, can get either a little bit more points or a special consideration in these processes. And what's the legal reasoning behind this is because purpose-driven companies are trying to or delivering social environmental impact, which is public. That characteristic of being public, of being of collective interest or nationwide interest is the reason why these points are given to these companies. So those are just two of many of these tools, but that definitely is something that cannot be done without the proper legal framework. Because having these companies in the legal framework is the starting point to having the light of the attention of both the public sector, the private sector, the consumers, the citizens towards this new category of doing business. So that's why, or that's the main reason why it's important to talk about it. It's important that it's discussed both in academia, in commercial practices, and that's why I think we're all very happy that this report is out to start this conversation in Morocco today.
Thank you very much, Juan Diego, and I think we can conclude on that note. I would like to thank our speakers and discussants today who helped us better understand the fourth sector, the role of purpose-driven companies in the fourth sector, and the potential for them to thrive here in Morocco, supported by a proper legal framework and appropriate incentives. We are very keen on keeping this conversation going and providing the platform and space to further discuss purpose-driven companies and social enterprises, and perhaps extend the conversation to other countries on the continent as well. So this could be an invitation for people interested in delving more into this topic to contact us to join the momentum. We'd be very happy to provide the space. Thank you to our viewers who joined us live today, who tuned into the Policy Center for the New South's webinar, and for joining the conversation today. We hope to be able to see you again very soon, and hopefully this time in person. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.